I would now request the Honorable Minister to please come and address the gathering. Mr. S. Iqbal.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, researchers, academicians, friends of Pakistan, it is indeed a great pleasure for me to be visiting IFPRI and to meet all of you. The purpose of my visit to DC actually is a conference on urbanization, which I will address tomorrow. But I took this opportunity to engage with the research and think tank community because as part of our strategy to make future development plans for Pakistan, we have a model which is based on a strategic partnership of three actors: public sector, private sector, and research and academia. It is through a collective enterprise of the three stakeholders we think that we can make our way forward on a journey which can transform Pakistan's economy into a knowledge-led economy. As you all know, that the industrial economy has almost disappeared, and we live in a new era of a knowledge revolution age, where knowledge is the principal driver of wealth creation, development, and progress. So in order to progress and grow, we need to create knowledge links and knowledge foundations for a strong and competitive economy. But while we create new knowledge foundations, I constantly remind our knowledge community that we have not been very bad or very poor at creating knowledge. In terms of a Harvard professor, and I quote him in every talk I give to research community, he said that a sign of a sick organization is that there is a huge knowing-doing gap. It's not that the failed organizations or sick organizations lack knowledge. It is that they lack the ability to translate or transform that knowledge into action. If you come to any ministry in Pakistan, it is not that we do not know the problems. It is not that we do not know the answers. There have been number of studies which have been done by various friends of Pakistan, multilateral agencies, bilateral agencies, but somehow those studies have remained on the bookshelves. So I think that if we have to move forward, we have to create a bias for action. We have to create an environment where we can translate the knowledge we have into implementable, actionable programs and minimize the knowing-doing gap that exists in our country. So therefore, in our new scheme or in our new philosophy of things, we are looking at knowledge which has relevance for implementation, which has relevance for putting things into action. We are still a country which does not have sufficient resources where we can take research for the sake of research. We are not in the business of pushing or taking the knowledge frontiers to new levels. That's not our business. Our business is a very applied research which will enable us to realize our developmental goals. Because the level where we are we have to fight poverty. We have to jumpstart our economy and put Pakistan on a fast trajectory of 6, 7, 8% growth so that we are able to look after a very young population. Population is a challenge for Pakistan, but we cannot write off our population. If we look after our young population well, this can translate into a demographic dividend. But if we ignored our young population and did not give them opportunities of education, skill development, and enterprise, they are capable of bringing a spring revolution every spring in Pakistan. So therefore, it is our endeavor that we create a condition, an economic environment where economy of Pakistan can create job opportunities for the young population at a level where they find opportunities of decent livelihood and quality of life. Food security becomes a very critical issue for a country which has a population of 190 million people and for a country whose water supply is receding. Today we are facing a very serious energy crisis, and it is largely because, as Ms. Nusrat was sharing with you, in our previous government in 1998, we had done a Pakistan 2010 program to look at the future development needs of the country and had done a roadmap for every sector that if we have to achieve a certain level of development, what is it that we need to do to meet our energy requirements, water requirements, health, education, infrastructure. But unfortunately, in 1999, when the military government took over, it abolished the plan because they thought that if they continued with that plan, probably it will still give legitimacy to the previous government which they had overthrown. So they wanted to remove every symbol of the previous government. But it was fine to discontinue the plan had they given an alternate plan for future needs of Pakistan. For 14 years, the country was run on year-to-year basis and there was no mid-term or long-term development plan or a framework under which we could look at the future needs of Pakistan. So after 9/11, there was massive inflow of foreign exchange, foreign currency into Pakistan. There was growth in remittances, and there was other external flows, which resulted in a high growth platform. But because there was no framework to see that what will this translate into, while we had a high demand created because of those high growth rates and high consumerism which was created for various reasons, nobody was looking at the supply side. So we have a terrible energy crisis. We have a situation where we are unable to meet the energy demands of agriculture sector, industrial sector, and the domestic sector. So today the energy crisis is costing us like 2 to 3% of GDP. And if we continue on that path, in less than 10 years we see a very serious water crisis, which will have implications for food security in Pakistan and which will have implications for stability in Pakistan. So therefore, when we came into government, we took some important decisions. First was to revive Ministry of Planning and Development, which in the last 14 years had been abolished and was actually merged with Ministry of Finance. And in Ministry of Finance, people are actually so busy fighting the fiscal crisis all the time, making both ends meet. No one has any time to look at the long-term demands and challenges of the economy. So Ministry of Planning and Development was not only revived, but its scope was expanded. It is now planning, development and reform. Because if we have to now develop and move forward in a very challenging times, and I normally describe the biggest case study of how fast the times have become, the forces of change have become, is this piece of technology from the Museum of Smartphones, which is called BlackBerry. Just 2 years ago, it had a market share of 52%, and today it's almost bankrupt. So this is how the forces of change cause dinosaurs of today look like pygmies tomorrow. So if we have to survive in this ever-changing environment, reform has to be adopted as a permanent is a permanent element in the plan of programs or schemes. So the ministry is now planning development and reform so that we are continuously able to see that what is it that we need to change and what are the reforms we need to undertake on continuous basis so that we remain aligned with the global and regional changes which are taking place in our part of the world. So looking at that, I think in coming back to the scope where IFPRI is very relevant, agriculture and food security, I think the time has come for Pakistan to have a Green Revolution 2.0, a new model of Green Revolution. In 60s, we had one Green Revolution in Pakistan, which enabled us to provide food to our people. And largely on the basis of that 60s Green Revolution, we have been able to sustain ourselves in terms of food security for last 3-4 decades. But now, if we did not produce another Green Revolution 2.0 version, I think the present agriculture infrastructure is not then capable of sustaining the demand of the new population load which our country has to feed in the future. To do so, we have to increasingly rely on new research. We have to increasingly rely on the new technologies. As you all know, that in this knowledge revolution age, the 6 technologies which are going to shape the destiny of human civilization will play a critical role for any country. Microelectronics, computers, telecommunications, robots, man-made materials, and biotechnology. And many of these technologies have great relevance for agriculture productivity and production. And we have to create a technology triangle of public sector, private sector, and research institutions which will enable us to use the new technologies for higher yields. Not only because Pakistan has some of the lowest yields in the world with a very rich agriculture base. We have huge agricultural land, we have water, we have human resources, we have weathers. We have perfect conditions for agriculture, unlike many developed countries where less than 5% of their land is fit for agriculture. We have large plains, but unfortunately, because of poor on-farm management practices and for poor research, we are not able to fully capitalize the full potential of Pakistan's agricultural endowment. And therefore, as part of our Vision 2025, we want to make a transformation from a low-value agriculture sector to a high-value agriculture sector. For every ton of commodity product, or for every dollar we export from a commodity product, we can easily earn $15 to $20 if we go into high-value agricultural crops. We can increase the harvest or the yields of wheat crop only by improving on-farm management practices from 70 to 300% in many cases. So there is a huge potential for gain, and that is what we are looking at. Number two, a major driver or a major imperative, as I said, for us is water. We have to go into seeds. We have to go for crops which consume less water and give more yield. Even our rice production, in terms of our water consumption, is very inefficient. So we have to optimize the water resource in agriculture sector so that we are able to meet needs of the future. And this all will require a lot of research. As it has been mentioned in your last slide, I would just briefly share with you the 7 key directions we have set for the future course of development in Pakistan. The 7 themes we have as part of our Pakistan 2025 program, which are our priority areas. We are trying to build strong foundations for an economy which is sustainable, which is competitive, and which can provide jobs for our future youth. The first and foremost priority of our long-term plan is to have energy security. Because as I mentioned and I shared with you, lack of planning and lack of integrated planning. We let energy sector grow in silos, and today we have a terrible mess. Just to share with you example of gas. There were allocations being made in industrial sector without any regard to what was happening in other sectors, in domestic sector, in CNG transport sector, what were the allocations being made in other sectors. Nobody cared about that. So now we have a situation that if you provide gas for one sector, you have to shut down other 2 sectors. So there has to be an integrated plan to see that we have energy security where we can provide affordable energy and sustainable energy to our industry, to our agriculture, to our domestic base. And to overcome this shortage, we have a plan on short-term basis, medium-term basis, and long-term basis. In the short-term basis, we are trying to harness the potential of solar energy and optimizing the present infrastructure. Because through investing in the present infrastructure, there are some gains which we can make. By making a good demand management, there are some savings which we can make. And through solar energy, we can put on grid fastest, compared to any other means, new power, we can supply for the grid. But then our problem is that we have a very high cost of generation, because in the past there was a very extensive investment in the oil-based power generation. So we have to then in the medium term look for means which are cheaper, which will bring our cost of generation down, and we are now promoting or developing coal-based power generation plants which can be done in 3 to 4 years, and they will give us relief by bringing down our cost structure, because the present cost structure is not sustainable, people cannot afford. And in the long run, we are working on hydel projects, Dasu and Bhasha. And Bhasha Dam, very rightly said, has two very important relevances for us. One, it provides us opportunity to generate cheap electricity through hydel source, but most importantly, it provides us water for our future agriculture. And if we did not have Bhasha Dam in time, that is, if we do not start work on Bhasha Dam today, which will take 9 to 10 years to complete, we in 1 decade's time will find ourselves in serious trouble. There would certainly be drought conditions in many parts of Pakistan, which are today very fertile for agriculture. So we have a serious challenge looming before us for next 10 years. That is, what will happen to water availability. And Bhasha Dam is one safety net, I would say, for us to ensure that we can store and we can provide water for our future agriculture and for our future food security. And therefore, from places like IFPRI, advocacy for Bhasha Dam, I think, would be a great support to Pakistan, because we need to sensitize the development community that they must immediately come forward and put up financing for this project, because this is very critical for not just development in that part of the world, but also stability of that part of the world. Imagine if there is food insecurity with such a large young population, what would be the dimension of political unrest, political instability that might unfold in a region which is already very explosive. So it is very important that if we want to stabilize that part of the world, we invest in food security, we invest in opportunities of growth and development so that these young population can look up to economic development and economic alternatives. Number 2 priority is that we want to make a shift from external drivers of growth to internal drivers of growth. Pakistan's dilemma has been that we have in the past relied very heavily on external drivers of growth. Foreign aid, foreign loans and remittances. So whenever you had this tap open and there was liberal inflow of foreign aid or foreign loans or remittances, our economy jacked up, the growth rates went up and we had good time. When foreign inflows dried, our growth rates came down. So we have largely generated growth through exogenous factors. And I think it is about time that we try to develop our own endogenous internal drivers of growth. And therefore, this is the second area of priority where we are focusing now on developing domestic resource base. First, tax to GDP ratio, which was 13.5% in 99 when we left government, and today we have inherited less than 9% tax to GDP ratio. So we are now aiming to take it back to 13 to 14% in 5 years. This is a tall order, but I think there is no escape. If we do not have our own domestic resources for our development needs, we cannot get out of this begging bowl syndrome, and a borrowed development is no development. Second, we have to take measures to increase our savings and investment rates, which have gone very low. So a country which faces very low savings and investment rates also cannot have its own resources to grow. 3, we have to develop our own science and technology and innovation so that we are able to increase our productivity, we are able to improve our competitiveness, which will enable also to have a more robust export sector. Because through exports we can have more sustainable earnings of foreign currencies, or that is the way to have a more stable and sustainable foreign reserve rather than rely on an IMF tranche when will it come and how will it stabilize our balance of payment situation. So in the past, our planners have not truly harnessed the export potential of Pakistan economy. So now we are trying to develop and have a more robust export sector development program, so that we can produce the kinds of gains. We need to have some leapfrog jump in our exports. We currently have $25 billion export, but we hope that by 2025 we should be able to touch $100 billion plus export mark. Otherwise, it's very difficult for us to achieve what we are aiming for. And this can be done. And there is a debate how it can be done, but I will, for shortage of time, will not go into details. Our third priority is investing and building human and social capital. We have ignored human and social capital in the past. We thought that building dams, building highways, building physical infrastructure was development. Those are maybe symbols of development, but that's not development. It's like a computer without software is only worth the sheet metal and plastic that goes into it. What gives computer real value is its software. So development also gets its true value by the software of people, the human resource, the social capital which societies have, the ethics and values which run that infrastructure. Without these sets of values, this kind of human and social capital, infrastructure has no meaning. So therefore we have social and human capital as a major priority in our area, not just typically in terms of education systems. Yes, we want to have a more creative, innovative curriculum, all those things which go into building human resource of a country, better healthcare, better population plans. But we are also going as far as to see that how can we create a new construct of mental model for our people, which is more pro-development and which is more compatible with the knowledge revolution age. We unfortunately have a mental model which is very politicized. We tend to look at things in a very political prism, through a political prism. So we need to have a much greater appreciation for the economic and the developmental imperative. And therefore we are starting a major program which is called Development Communications through Planning Commission. And I'll give you one example. I had the other day a batch of foreign service freshmen or internees who are just joining our foreign service. I asked them, what is MDGs? So everyone answered, yes, Millennium Development Goals. So I said, why is it really necessary for us to achieve MDGs? And each one of them said, sir, it is an international convention and we must fulfill our international obligation. I said, good. So then I said, should we fight illiteracy because it is an international obligation, or should we do it for our own sake? Should we eliminate disease because it is an international obligation, or should we do it for our own sake? Should we eradicate poverty because it is an international obligation, or should we do it for our own sake? And then they realized what I was saying. We have not developed ownership for a development agenda in the minds of people. And we still see many of the developmental themes as themes of international obligations or international conventions which we must comply with, because those are obligations. Those are our own developmental imperatives. We have to grow, we have to develop as a respectable country. We must have good quality education for our people. We must have good healthcare. So that is what I mean, that we need to reprogram the mental models in which we have much greater ownership of development agenda, so that we can move fast on the development path. The fourth important priority for us is, as I said before also, value addition in all productive sectors, agriculture, industry and service sector. We still are very much a commodity economy and we want to move into value addition. I gave you examples from agriculture. Similarly in industry, for every dollar of cotton yarn we export, we can very easily earn 15 to 20 dollars if we produce good quality garments, fashion garments. So there is a huge gains which are to be made through through completing the whole value chain in most of the clusters. In agriculture, again, I would say that we have failed to fully realize the agriculture potential. And one classic example I would again give: in 98, 99, we started a project which was abandoned, but now we are again reviving. In Potwar area, the area around Rawalpindi, Islamabad, the climate is such that this can produce as good olive as you get in Turkey, in Syria, in Lebanon. So we can be a major player in olive cultivation and olive production in the world. But no one has harnessed. So the idea is that you need to look at your competencies and look at the global opportunities and link the two. And that way we can have a high value added economy. So that's the kind of transition when I say that we are seeking to make. If you go to a place near Lahore which is called Patoki, it has all the makings of becoming a top quality horticultural cluster. If flowers can fly from Bangkok and can be sold in London, or red roses can go from Bangkok and be sold in restaurants in Paris and London the same day in the evening, there is no reason why cut flowers from Pakistan cannot fly out to Europe or to Brussels or to Paris or to London and cannot be sold in the restaurants there in the evening. So we need to create these links so that we move towards a value added agriculture. If we can attract some of these big names, Dole or some of these big food companies, Pakistan has so much fruit and vegetable that we can be in that supply chain of these agricultural products, global supply chain, and can really make great gains. The fifth priority is building a modern infrastructure, which will enable us to become a hub within our region. Pakistan lies in the center of three engines of growth in Asia: Central Asia, South Asia, and China. So we are seeking to build regional connectivities, which will carve out a one large, big 3 billion market in Asia through integration of these three regions. Not only that will bring great many opportunities in that part of Asia, but it will also be a great impetus for the global economy. There will be great opportunities for the whole global economy in this large regional market, which will be carved out with the regional integration or regional connectivity infrastructure projects, like one we have recently done with China from Punjab to Gwadar, and others which we are doing through CARIC, which is Central Asia Region Economic Cooperation Forum, supported by all the multilateral institutions. So through that we are doing east, west and north, south connectivity, so that we connect with India on one side, with Afghanistan and Central Asian republics on the other side, and with China and other Central Asian republics here in the north. So developing an infrastructure which will create these linkages is an important priority for us, for Pakistan to harness its full potential. Then sixth is developing a very modern public sector, reforming the public sector, carrying out institutional reforms. As I said, we are now planning development and reform. We are moving in that direction. We have started a new initiative, which is reform and innovation in government. We have allocated rupees 800 million, modest 800 million from our own resources, not relied in the past. They always relied on donors' money to do governance initiatives, because it was best to get donor money in the name of governance. So we thought that no, because we need to do governance in our own, for our own sake, and we need to make and commit our own resources because we need to do it for our own sake. So we have made a big commitment of resources to modernize our civil service, to modernize our public sector management, to adopt e-government practices, and to initiate innovation. And we are launching an innovation fund for public sector with modest rupees 250 million rupees, where we will fund small innovation projects for public servants to undertake e-government and other initiatives which will improve the delivery of service and bring cost cuttings in government operations. So institutional reform and governance is the sixth important link which we think is very important for us to move forward. And finally, as I said, that we think that all these plans will only work if they overcome knowing doing gap. So to do that, we are building a capacity and planning commission which we call through a delivery unit. This delivery unit will translate all our plans into KPIs. And through monthly monitoring of these KPIs, we are going to evaluate performance of every ministry, and on quarterly basis, we will hold them accountable for their performance and see what are the reasons they are not doing well, and the departments and the ministries which are doing well, they will be recognized. So we create a system where plans are put to practice, and we translate, as Malaysians say, 30,000 feet policies and plans into 3 feet implementation plans. So that was the missing link, which created a big knowing doing gap. So this is kind of a outline of what we are seeking to do. But to realize our goals, I think our collaboration with the research institutions, with the academia is very important, because as part of our strategy, we seek to bring this change in a collaborative mode, in a collaboration, as I said, in a technology triangle, in a knowledge triangle, which comprises of public sector, private sector, and research and academia. And IFPRI has been a great supporter of this work, and now with our new management and planning ministry, we have had number of meetings, and we are trying to see that how can we align the research agenda of IFPRI in Pakistan and many other research projects with the development goals we have. Because one of the things we hold very dear to us is that every rupee and every dollar which goes into research must have an economic payoff. Because we cannot afford pure research at the moment. We must have a very focused research which will bring us economic dividends, which will bring us economic payoff, and which will help us move further on our development goals. So this alignment of research agenda with the development strategy, I think is very critical, so that we can synergize our efforts in development sector with research community and can move faster. With these words, I thank you all for a very patient hearing, and if you have any questions, I will be very pleased to answer them. Thank you very much.